Hi, I'm Nathan Oakley, and off the back of the amazing success of my dating tips video for girls, one guy got in touch and said, "Are you going to do one for guys?" And I was like, well, not really. That hadn't been my intention. It was just sort of, I didn't expect that many people to watch it, and I kind of just wanted to share it with the odd person that asked me, based on the fact that I've got married from a dating website, what my tips were. And it's usually women that ask, so a guy's asked, so this is the video for him and anybody else who wants to watch it. I'm sure it won't be very popular, or maybe it will, who knows. Like if you like it, dislike if you dislike it, leave a comment below, subscribe if you've not already. But here goes. These are my dating tips for men off the top of my head, and they are very much off the top of my head. Probably it's more going to be like a do's and don'ts video, but the biggest mistake I see from guys is that they will go for this kind of scattergun approach to the dating websites, which is to say that they'll look up the lists of women, have a quick glance at the photograph, and then fire off a one-line message. We'll call it an email just for the sake of this video. So they'll fire off a one-line email to their prospective date, "How you doing?" or "Crack a crummy joke," or whatever, you know, just a very thoughtless contact. And to put a positive spin on it and say what you should do, take your time, study the profiles of the women that you are interested in, and actually try and find one that's actually reasonably compatible, as opposed to one that you just like the look of. So most women will go to a lot of trouble to write out long profiles with plenty of information, and that leaves the guys lots of opportunity to go through those and pick out things that vibrate on both sides. So you can then, when you actually take the trouble of writing an email, rather than writing a one-line email as soon as you see a pretty face that you like, as I say, read the profile, make sure that the person is actually compatible with you, because it may be the case that you read their profile and find nothing in common, and the reality is that that will be the case when you meet them. So you could spend a lot of time chatting with somebody and seeming to get on, having followed a few tips, you know, not necessarily this video, as I say, dislike if you dislike. But yeah, make sure you actually go to the trouble of seeing that you are compatible with the person that you've found an attraction to on a physical basis, and then write them an email that makes it clear that you have actually read their profile, that shows an interest. Show them interest is what I'm trying to get at. Again, like I said in the video about dating tips for girls on websites, dating websites, the same applies here for guys, which is to say that rather than sort of making all of your effort in the search, make all of your effort be in the contact. So try and keep it specifically about them. That was kind of the point. So if you can phrase your email all about you and your in the phrasing, so about the person that you are actually contacting, your potential date, talk about them. In other words, everybody's their own favourite subject. So that would be my tip. The person that contacted me asked a few questions just to give me an idea of things that I could actually talk about in this video, and one of the things he said was that he'd got a profile, but he hadn't put much thought into that profile. So that would be the next tip, which is to say, actually consider things about yourself that you like, things that you don't try and think in terms of things that might be appealing to a woman, but things that you find appealing about yourself. Try to be honest. Again, in the same breath, saying that you enjoy drinking beer and watching football won't necessarily go over for a girl. It's all in the phrasing. You know, if you can somehow phrase that in a way, I mean, if that is your obsession, obviously there's plenty of women out there that are into soccer or American football or whatever, depending on what part of the world you're watching this, baseball. You know, if there are sports fans out there, you know, just don't make 5 paragraphs about your sports fan addiction, because it might be the case that there's women out there that are into sports, but it may not be the case that you're going to find that absolute, you know, devotee to your particular team. So try and keep it as much as possible about them. In other words, write about you and your in your email to your prospective client. Off the top of my head, let's think of a few of the things that we talked about while I was in the yes. This would be definitely a don't in the don't category. So I'm speaking off the top of my head. When I had this conversation, I had my wife with me, so she was there to sort of correct me, and she nodded along and agreed for the most part. I think, I'm not a girl, I think that most women expect at some stage men to talk about sex. In other words, there's going to be a groany sigh when they read that flirty, what the guy will think is just a nice flirtatious way of talking. And I'm now talking in terms of you having actually contacted somebody, you've taken the trouble of writing out a decent email, you've read their profile, you've made sure you are actually compatible, and then you've sent them a message, you've had a back and forth email exchange, 2 or 3, 4 or 5 messages have gone by, and then the guy can't resist the temptation, some will be even sooner, second message, maybe even the first, will start to talk about sex. And I may as well explain why I had this rule. My first ever introduction, and if you've watched my videos in my other category, you may know this story anyway. If not, it makes sense, it's relevant. When I was first introduced to the internet, the person that showed me instant messaging on AOL, and immediately got in touch with a random person, no photographs at the time, this is in the late 90s, and he started to talk dirty to her, asking what she was wearing, and because he had an anonymous name and she was just a random girl, he felt obliged to do this, and I swore that that would not be something I would do, that it would be expected. Because of my first ever introduction is a guy being pervy, I thought that will be what women expect. So to do the opposite is to kind of contain yourself until the point that either it comes up naturally upon meeting, or you discuss, they discuss it first with you. So in other words, if women, you're flirting, you're onto 10th message and they get flirty, that's only natural as well. But I find it's, in my opinion, better to, as a guy, refrain, because it's just going to be expected that that will happen, and when it's read, whatever, I'm not going to even attempt to say the sorts of things I'm sure you can imagine, but the woman would read that and their heart would sink, unless they have naturally brought it up, in which case, game on, wonderful. So that would be tip number 3, I think. So don't talk about sex if you can possibly avoid it. Number 1 would be actually go to the trouble of reading their profile and writing out a decent message, and number 2 would be actually come up with a decent profile yourself. And I think I've covered this already, but I say try to give the person who's reading it enough information, but by the same token, leave it open for them to ask you questions. You don't want to answer every single bit of information about yourself, and you also, if you do this, if you take my advice, you will also naturally feel kind of like you're giving them this information, and if they reply, naturally you will think, well, they must have read all of that information on my profile, I took such a long time over it. And it may be very well the case that you send out a message, somebody gets a ping on their phone and literally just reads off the message and replies and know nothing about you, only to then at a later date, the lady of your choosing, once they've replied, maybe have a couple of emails, will go and actually read your profile, and if at that point you've left nothing open to be discovered about you, it's a little bit more difficult for that woman to then keep the conversation going, especially if you've put them off. The last put them off with, like I said, endless boring reams about, say, football. Anyway, the last point would be about photographs, and again this echoes the video I made about dating tips for girls, which is to say you don't need lots and lots and lots and lots of photographs. The chances are not all of them will be the money shot. My wife used to watch videos about models, and they'd take endless shots and they'd go through them with a fine-tooth comb and say, that one is the one, that's a good shot, that's it. The rest, are never used or seen. And the same can be said for most people's photographs. If you've got, like most people have, hundreds and hundreds of photographs, go through them and find your best shot. Like with, again, the video about women's tips for dating websites, find your best shot and find your best recent shot. That way, in a setting that's nice, so not like with the other video in my lounge, this is in my kitchen off the cuff after a conversation with somebody in my community, and yeah, it's best to go out in a nice setting, somewhere with the sunshine on your face, have a shave, get something nice, clean clothes on, get somebody else to take a good photograph, get it framed nicely, and that's pretty much it. I don't think there'll be a part 2. Don't ask me any questions about your profile because you won't get an answer. That's not what this video is about. I'm not going to offer any further advice. I didn't think I'd make a second video, but that being said, I hope you've enjoyed it. I'll say it a third time because this isn't my usual subject matter. Like if you like the video, dislike if you dislike the video, share, subscribe if you haven't already. I've been Nathan Oakley. I'll see you all in the next video.